The story of ancient empires is filled with wars, betrayals, and shifting dynasties. But hidden beneath the marble pillars and golden thrones are tales that speak not of power, but of love. Love that often ended in fire, blood, or silence. This is the story of one such love, forbidden in its time, whispered in corridors of palaces, and remembered only in fragments of scrolls. It is the story of an emperor's lover who met his death not with a sword, not with poison, but in flames, burned alive in his very bed. The Roman Empire, at the height of its power, was not just a kingdom of laws and soldiers. It was also a theater of passion, lust, and cruel punishments. Every emperor, no matter how powerful, was chained to the expectations of his people and the judgment of history. What he loved, who he chose to keep close, and who shared his bed. These things mattered as much as war victories. Whispers carried through the marble halls of Rome, whispers that could raise men to thrones or bury them in ashes. And when those whispers reached the wrong ears, even the most private of relationships could become a reason for death. Our story begins with an emperor, whose reign was marked by splendor and cruelty. He was a man who had conquered cities, broken rebellions, and stood as a godlike figure before his people. But in the secrecy of his palace chambers, he was simply a man who had given his heart to another. That other was no queen, no noblewoman, no political bride chosen by the Senate. He was a young man of beauty, charm, and intelligence, someone who captured the emperor's gaze in a single moment. Their meeting was not written in official scrolls, but their closeness could not be hidden from the eyes of those who served in the palace. The lover became the emperor's shadow, present in hunts, feasts, and long nights under candlelight. In the empire of iron and blow, their bond was delicate yet unshakable. But bonds like this had no place in the public image of an emperor. What began as whispers soon turned into accusations that would seal the young man's fate. The Roman court was a place of daggers hidden behind smiles. Senators, rivals, and even the emperor's own family often watched his every move. To them, love was not love. It was weakness, a flaw, an opening to strike. And when the emperor's lover rose too high in influence, when his presence at the emperor's side grew too obvious, it became clear that something had to be done. For Rome demanded a mask of power. An emperor could be cruel, he could be vain, he could even be mad. But to love someone who did not fit the empire's vision of strength was unforgivable. The punishment was chosen carefully. Not exile, not a quick death by sword. Something more final, more humiliating. Something that would erase him from memory and serve as a warning to all who watched. The emperor's lover was condemned to burn. Not in a public square, not in an execution arena, but in his own bed, the very place where he had once found warmth and closeness. Imagine the scene. A dark chamber, the window shuttered, guards moving quietly through corridors with torches in hand. The bed, once a symbol of intimacy, transformed into a funeral pyre. The young man, betrayed by those who feared his closeness to power, was trapped beneath heavy sheets. The flames rose, eating away at the silk, the wood, the life of a man who had been too close to greatness. His cries were muffled by the roar of fire, his body consumed before dawn. By morning, there was nothing left but ashes. Ashes quickly swept away, as if to erase his existence from the world. And yet, even ashes tell a story. The emperor himself was torn between fury and silence. Some say he wept, hiding in the shadows of his chambers. Others claim he turned cold, ordering that his lover's name never be spoken again. What truly happened in his heart, no scroll dares to record. For emperors were meant to be statues, not men of flesh and longing. But the truth of the lover's death spread beyond the palace walls. It became a tale whispered in taverns, murmured by slaves, and secretly passed from one generation to the next. A story too human to be forgotten, too tragic to be silenced. This is not just the tale of one man burned alive. It is the story of how power consumes love, how empires fear what they cannot control, and how even the warmest bed can become a grave. And so begins our journey, into the corridors of Rome, into the hearts of emperors, and into the flames that claimed the life of the one who dared to love. The palace of Rome was a place where marble shone, but shadows ruled. Behind every feast and triumphal procession lay quiet rivalries, unspoken fears, and jealous eyes that never stopped watching. Into this stage stepped the young lover, a man whose very presence seemed to disturb the careful balance of power. He was not born into nobility. Some say he was the son of a minor official, others that he had been brought from the provinces. What was certain, however, was his beauty, the kind of beauty that made even hardened generals turn their heads. His dark hair fell in curls, his face carried the glow of youth, and his voice charmed all who heard it. But it was not beauty alone that bound him to the emperor. He was clever. He listened when others boasted. He advised when others plotted. In a court where flattery was the most common language, his words carried sincerity, or at least the illusion of it. The emperor, weary of endless deceit, found comfort in him. The lover rose quickly. From simple company in hunts and games, he became a companion in council chambers. His hand rested lightly on scrolls as he stood beside the emperor during speeches. Servants whispered that the emperor consulted him more than his general, more than his senators. And with each passing day, the young man's place grew more dangerous. For Rome was not a city that forgave outsiders. The Senate, jealous of its fading power, saw in him a threat. Courtiers, who had spent their lives fighting for scraps of imperial attention, found themselves ignored. Even the empress, whether in truth or only in rumor, was said to have despised him, for he had taken a place in the emperor's heart that no throne could secure. Whispers began. Whispers always begin the same way. A smirk in a corridor, a raised brow at a banquet, a few words passed carefully from ear to ear. They say he spends too much time in the emperor's chambers. They say he has influence over military appointments. They say the emperor listens to him before he listens to the Senate. And soon, they say, became, we know. The young man himself seemed unaware, or perhaps he simply did not care. He walked through the palace with confidence, his robe trailing lightly on the polished floors. He laughed at feasts, hunted beside the emperor, and offered advice during debates. To him, it must have seemed that his place was secure, that love was stronger than politics. But nothing in Rome was stronger than politics. The first sign of danger came quietly. A senator, once friendly, turned his gaze away in cold silence. A servant, loyal for years, hesitated before bowing. An invitation to a banquet was suddenly forgotten. Still, the lover did not see the fire building beneath the marble floors. He was young, and youth often believes itself immortal. But the court was waiting. It was waiting for one mistake, one moment of arrogance that could be used against him. And when it came, they struck. The emperor, perhaps blinded by affection, began granting his lover privileges that even noblemen envied. A villa near the Tiber, gold ornaments, horses fit for genera. Ella's his seat was placed near the emperor's during public feasts, a place reserved only for blood or for gods, the people of thick stone. But the palace did not stir. No servants rushed to his side. No guards came to rescue. His cries were meant to be unheard. He tried to escape. He tore at the sheets, struggled against the flames, but the door had been locked, barred from the outside. His own chamber had become a prison. The fire consumed faster than he could fight. The oil-fed flames climbed the cedar frame, devouring cloth and flesh alike. His skin blistered, his hair curled in burning waves. His voice broke into desperate sobs. He called for the emperor. Perhaps he believed, in that final moment, that love could still save him. But love did not come. The emperor himself was elsewhere. Some claim in another chamber, distracted by feasts or council. Others whisper he had been deliberately kept away, told nothing until it was too late. What he knew, what he felt, remains uncertain. What is certain is this: by the time he was told, the chamber was already ashes. The lover's final moments were brutal. Historians record that his body, trapped beneath burning beams, was unrecognizable by morning. Only fragments of jewelry, a melted ring, and scorched bones remained. The bed that had once held whispers of affection was nothing more than a blackened pyre. The fire had not just consumed a man, it had consumed the very memory of him, for that was the true punishment, not simply death, but erasure. His name, his presence, his laughter, his role beside the emperor, all reduced to dust. But Rome is never silent. The palace staff whispered of what they had seen: the flames too sudden, the locked door, the guards who looked away. Some said they saw the emperor fall to his knees when he learned of the death, striking the marble floor with his fists in grief. Others claimed he hardened his heart, refusing to speak the lover's name again. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps he wept in private, but in public he turned to stone. The court, however, celebrated in silence. The Senate had achieved its goal. The generals were satisfied. The empress, whether guilty or not, wore her mask of composure. To them, the fire was not murder. It was purification. Rome had been cleansed of weakness, of softness, of a love that had no place in empire. And yet, the flames left scars that no victory could erase. That night, the emperor's chambers were colder than ever. The laughter was gone. The warmth was gone. He had been stripped of the one thing that made him human. Power remained, but power is a poor companion in the silence of midnight. The lover was gone, but his absence was louder than any presence. This was the true cruelty of Rome, not only to kill, but to destroy memory, to turn love into ashes and pretend it had never existed. But memory cannot be controlled. The emperor may have ordered silence, but the people spoke. Servants whispered of the fire. Slaves carried the tale into taverns. And soon, the story became legend. A lover burned alive in his bed, punished not for crime, but for love. Morning came slowly to Rome. The sun rose above the marble roofs, gilding them in light, but within the palace, the air was heavy with smoke and silence. The scent of ash still lingered in the emperor's private halls, a grim reminder of what had happened only hours before. The bedchamber was sealed. Guards stood outside with stern faces, but their eyes betrayed fear. Behind the door lay nothing but charred beams and blackened stone, the grave of a man whose name they would no longer dare to whisper aloud. The lover was gone, burned alive, his body turned to fragments, his memory turned to whispers. But the tragedy did not end there. The emperor was broken. Some said he rushed to the chamber too late, clawing at the doors with bare hands, only to be pulled back by guards as the fire roared within. Others whispered that he collapsed when he saw the remains, bones scattered across soot, a ring melted beyond recognition. For days he refused to appear before the Senate. He locked himself in his quarters, refusing food, speaking only in fragments. The empire expected strength, but what remained inside him was emptiness. He had been the ruler of millions, yet he could not protect one soul. And that wound, the wound of helplessness, was deeper than any sword could strike. But Rome does not wait for grief. The Senate pressed forward. The generals celebrated renewed focus. The empress, silent but triumphant, continued her duties. The empire did what it always did. It moved on, pretending the fire was a mere accident, a minor tragedy in the vast tide of history. Yet history is never so kind. The emperor returned to the throne days later, but something in him had changed. His voice, once filled with command, now carried cracks of sorrow. His eyes, once sharp with ambition, now bore shadows of memory. He sat on the golden throne, but the seat felt colder, emptier. In public, he was stone. He laughed when required. He passed judgments. He led ceremonies. To the people of Rome, nothing had changed. Their emperor remained the same. But at night, in the silence of his chambers, the illusion crumbled. The empty side of the bed stared back at him, a black void where once warmth had been. The echoes of laughter haunted the marble halls. Every torch he passed reminded him of fire. Every silence reminded him of screams. The palace itself had become a graveyard. Legends say he never spoke his lover's name again. Perhaps it was too painful. Perhaps it was forbidden. But silence itself became a form of mourning. For even when Rome demanded erasure, silence kept memory alive. The people whispered. Servants told the tale to their children. Slaves carried it to distant provinces. And with each retelling, the story grew darker, more haunting. The lover who had risen from nothing, who had been cherished by an emperor, and who had been burned alive in his own bed. It was no longer just a tragedy. It became a warning. Rome thrived on power, but love was weakness. Rome admired beauty, but beauty was dangerous. Rome remembered loyalty, but loyalty meant nothing against envy. In the end, the empire proved its rule once more. No man, no matter how beloved, could stand above politics. Not even the emperor's heart was safe from Rome's cruelty. Years passed. The empire continued to rise and stumble, as empires always do. New wars were fought, new treaties signed, new scandals whispered. But the story of that fire never disappeared. It lived in the silence of the emperor's eyes, in the unease of the Senate halls, in the hushed conversations of servants. The lover's ashes were swept away, but his memory lingered, not in monuments or statues, but in whispers, shadows, and legend. And perhaps that is the cruelest irony. The court had tried to erase him with fire, but fire does not erase. It transforms. From flesh to ash, from life to myth. His body was destroyed, but his story was made immortal. In the end, the emperor sat alone on his throne, cloaked in gold, surrounded by marble and power, yet more desolate than any beggar in the streets. The empire called him ruler, but he was only a man haunted by love lost to flames. And as he looked upon the city from his balcony, the torches flickering in the night below, one thought surely returned to him again and again. That the brightest fire in his life had not been the empire he ruled, but the lover who had once lain beside him. And the fire that had consumed him